This week's parsha basically it's a tough parsha to discuss because it's one of the few parshas that has so much going on. It's like there's so many different pratim details and different ideas what has to be done, or what was going on, and you start with the Keturis, and it mentions Mordechai, or at least Marge Roar, and that's the remez the Gemara says to Mordechai in the Torah itself, in Parshas Vayelech, that's what mentions Esther Panim, that Esther is mentioned and Haman is mentioned back at the beginning. So it's all, this is the Parashiyot that basically allude to, is connected to Purim. Has to do with the fact that also the Keturis is mentioned in the Parashah. The Keturis is always an allusion to the concept of Das Torah, Das Elokim, and that's what Purim is all about. As the priest already points out, that the reason why Haman hung Mordechai on an eitz, Chamishim Amma high, right, 50 Ammas high, didn't have to be so high. You could say it was actually the refuah before the Makkah, because eventually they hung Haman and his sons on it as well. So you needed a tall, but that wasn't Haman's thinking. So the priest explains that Haman and the enemies of the Jewish people, they can sense when something dramatically spiritual is going to take place, some kind of major change is going to take place. As the Gemara points out, that Klal Yisrael by Har Sinai, they said Nasav Nishma, back by Har Sinai, Kabbalah Torah, that it asked the question, why then did HaKadosh Baruch Hu hold the mountain over the heads of the Jewish people? The Gemara answered because we mentioned before that they were Makabel Torah Sh'Chasav B'Yahava, and here they were Makabel that, but they had a problem with Torah Sh'Bal Peh. And that's going to be an ongoing problem all through history. That's basically the Reform conservative movement issue, more the conservative movement issue, basically. But it's an ongoing problem through history because that's where all the pratim, all the details, the Masorah, you have to be Samech and the Rabbanim for the Masorah itself, the Bal Masorah, and all the different things that have been added to it to explain things or to make gedarim along the way. That's the sticking point for a lot of people. So Kadosh Baruch Hu held the mountains over the heads of the Jewish people in order to be able to emphasize the fact it's a one-shot deal. You can't make the distinction, you can't make divisions. It's an all or nothing type of a thing. Either you take the entire Torah, or you get none of the Torah. You have to also have Torah Shebal Peh as well. So Gemara says that they were makabel, or the Gemara says they were makabel at that time. They had no choice because that's what the mountain Harka Gigas means. They had to be makabel, but they didn't do it bi'ahava until Purim time, in Achashverosh's time. So the question is, what happened? So some say basically that because of the Hester Panim, they saw the Nisim, the floods that took place anyhow, in spite of the fact that the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu wasn't so galui at that time, but still they were safe from Haman and all that created a sense of Ahava in the Jewish people that inspired them to find Makabel Torah Shebal Peh. It's a little bit difficult, because quite frankly, it should be the other way around. Because by Har Sinai, with everything else going on at that point in time, usually, it's like, you shoot first and talk later, or ask questions later, basically. So by Har Sinai, with all the excitement going on, with all the miracles, the support, the light, the shofar, that's the time you're going to accept it and then work at the details later on. That's not the time to be afraid of it. By Purim time, that's the time, maybe it was a Hashgacha Pratis, maybe there are still people who are tiny, it wasn't Hashgacha Pratis in the end, but in the whole thing, as it says that Mordechai is only Merusa the Rov, only the majority of Klal Yisrael were on Mordechai's side at the end of all of it. They didn't see the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu completely, and that's one of the reasons why they didn't come back from Babel on time. The Zohar says that was supposed to be the final Geula at that point in time, the Geula from Babel, because the one from Mitzrayim was supposed to be the final one. That didn't succeed. So the one from Babel was the next one that was up, that could have been the final Geula for history. And it says that the well springs of wisdom of Chachma opened up in Shemayim, specifically to give the Jewish people the ability to be able to make Aliyah, come back to Israel, and build the Beis Hamikdash, which was Chezkiel's plan, which is supposed to be the last Beis Hamikdash, the third and final Beis Hamikdash. In the end, the second, that would have been the second Beis Hamikdash, which would have been the final one. Instead, we have to wait for the third one now in Mashiach's time. Same plan, but that was supposed to be the completion of the Beis Hamikdash back at that time. But because the majority or a large part of the Klal Yisrael did not come back at that time, it says the well springs of Chachma closed up once again, and we no longer had the tools to bring the Gula Shlema at that time. So the one from after that, Medai was part of that, but Yavin, eventually Edom, which is the one we're going through right now. Even Edom, even after 2,000 years of exile, we're still not ready for the Gula Shlim, which is why Yishmael has come along as part of the, like it's a mitzvah, it's a special 2-for-1 type of deal over here. Right? You get to have two exiles for the price of one. The price of one was quite steep, quite frankly, but that's where Klal, we just don't seem to ever get it quite right. It's almost like the joke's on us, like somehow, like we're blinded by the whole thing. But it all comes down to this concept of dust. That's the difference. Not that Klal Yisrael, it was like, wow, what a great miracle. What has to Pari and Kosh Baruch Hu saved us? Let's all be Makabel Torah Shebal Peh. Right? I feel like adding on something. I feel like taking on more obligations, and not that actually taking more obligations because they were doing it. But after all this time of doing it, B'tzar and complaining and all that, after this fantastic miracle by Purim, let's all be Makabel Torah Shebal Peh B'Simcha. Who said that? Where'd that come up, and why was that the reaction to it? It's not what's going on over here. It wasn't done because of that, but you have to have das to be able to mikabel Torah Shebal Peh bi'ahava, right? We see this on a very everyday level with children, right? There's all kinds of things we tell children they have to do for their own good, but they won't do it. When they get older, they will do it on their own, right? But it's a das. We even call it when a person becomes bar mitzvah to become a bar das. That's the whole thing. Why is it possible? And it's a transformation. For example, why can't a boy who's one day before his bar mitzvah do the kriya in shul on Shabbos for everybody else and be yotzi them? During the week, it's not a big issue because there's no real chiv on the individual to hear the parsha. It's just a chiv on the tzibur to read it because of the whole gezer that they made because they're not to go 3 days without the kriya, right? The water's Torah. So on Shabbos, though, it's a chiyuv, on the individual. Every male individual above the age of 13 has to hear every single word of the parsha, and really, you're supposed to make it up if you don't. If you're sick, you should really make it up because it's a chiyuv to hear every single word of the entire Torah all year round. Read b'tzibur, with a balkar, according to the halachas, and whether we do it in the end. If a bar mitzvah boy, turns bar mitzvah before he does it, so he can of course do it. But what if he does it one day before his bar mitzvah? Are you yotzi the mitzvah of hearing the parsha? And the answer is no. Even though it's one day before his bar mitzvah. What's the difference? There are mitzvahs where I only have to hear, for example, Megillah, right? I have to hear it. So there it's possible to be a bar mitzvah, to read the Megillah, to be yotzi, right? But by Sefer Torah, it has to be that he is already a bar mitzvah to read it. Why? Because there's certain halachas about being motzi a person in the mitzvah, that there's a certain likeness. You have to be like me. You have to have the chiyuv, just like I have the chiyuv. You have to have the chiyuv to be able to be motzi me in the end. But there's another aspect, there's another added element to it, and that is basically that when a person becomes bar mitzvah, there's a transformation. And the transformation transforms the child. He's not chayiv in mitzvahs yet. It could be 1 minute before, shkia, before he becomes, before he becomes bar mitzvah. He's not chayiv in mitzvahs yet. There's a mitzvah of chinuch, but not a chayiv of mitzvahs per se at that point in time, because he has not become a bar das yet. But come on, really. 1 minute before? Okay, 6 months before, a year before, even a couple months before, but 1 minute before his bar mitzvah, he's not a bar das. No, because at that point in time, Kabbalah explains he gets his ruach, the next level up, and that transforms him into a whole different individual. But there's a technical transformation. It's all about das. As Rashi points out this week's parsha, he even refers to das as being ruach HaKodesh. That all the Chachmei Lev who are going to participate in the building of the Mishkan, the Kelim, they're going to get das. And Rashi explains das to be Ruach HaKodesh. And the truth is, that's really what it is. Atachan eladam da'as. We say every single day. Because Baruch Hu, you give da'as. Well, he gives everything in the end. So what's unique about das? Yeah, he gives everything, but he gives everything else he gives to you, your health and parnasa, and he does it b'derech teva. There's a way to eat food you can be healthy. It's all a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's all lamala min teva. But he will work b'derech teva to make it look like it's teva. So therefore you can do teva-dik things to take care of yourself. If you eat healthy food, the Rambam says, and the Halacha says, and the Seichel says, you will be healthier. Now there's a Kabbalistic reason why. Because healthy food, as we mentioned before, I think, is determined based upon the amount of netzotzi kedusha in the food itself, which is what your soul needs to survive, because that's what connects the body and soul together. Okay, forget the Kabbalah part. Put all that aside in the meantime. It's healthy food, right? You look at the side of the box. It doesn't say, oh, this cereal is high in Notzotze Kedusha, right? So therefore, if you eat this, you'll be doing quite well. It has niacin and riboflavin, and who gave these names in the first place? You know, like vitamin A, vitamin B. It was much simpler in those days, right? All these different things that you can eat to make you healthy, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is being mashpia on you, but derech teva. But das is different. Das won't come but derech teva. There's a big difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge you can get but derech teva. Anybody can get it. You can make yourself knowledgeable. All you have to do is go to a shelf, read the book, concentrate on the words. You know, it depends upon the mind that a person has as well. But for the average person who's focusing, even people, for example, who didn't do that well in school, I discovered way later in life that if you actually pay attention to what you're doing, you can do better on your grades and your testing again. Right? I just thought it was a kind of automatic thing in the early years. But if you actually focus and read and pay attention, so then you can actually improve your knowledge base and do better on the test. Because knowledge you can accumulate by simply sitting down and making the effort to learn. The bottom line is that when it comes to knowledge, almost anybody can access it if they make the effort. Almost anybody. Chachma is a whole different thing. Chachma is the transformation of knowledge into understanding about life and history and human nature in such a way that you can harness it to grow closer to God. That's the whole point of Chachma. The whole point of wisdom is to harness it to bring yourself close to God. And if you pursue it like money and bury treasures, says Shlomo HaMelech, then das Elokim you will find, he writes. Right? Not because you'll find it, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give it to you. Atachon l'adam das. You give man das. Nobody else is going to give a person das except for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what happened by Purim time was there was an influx of das. The Prince Tzedek explains that Haman, the enemy, can always sense on some level, Amalek, for example, because they know in Shemayim. Because every nation has a sar, right? Every nation, has a what do you call it? What kind of angel? Guardian angel, right? Thank you. A guardian angel in Shemayim that not only looks over the people, but actually is the conduit for all the shefa to flow from Hashem to the nation. So if that sar dies, the nation dies. And not just that as the result, but even mountains and trees and rivers, they all have a sar. That if you see a river dry up, it's because the sar dried up in Shemayim. For whatever reason, you see a mountain collapse, or there's an earthquake, whatever, and the mountain collapses because the sar in Shemayim collapses. So they know already, they have access to the Tachnit. They know already what's going on in Shemayim. So does ours, of course. Right? Michael, who's the Sar, the guardian angel of the Jewish people, is in Shemayim, looking down upon us and providing us with shefa on behalf of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Klal Yisrael, and supposedly directing us and guiding us, but we don't pay attention, we don't listen. We reject the shefa. We don't use it necessarily. It's an ongoing battle that goes back to this week's Parsha. This is the start of it all. Now, this could be called coincidence, if you believe in coincidence. We don't believe in coincidence. It's a problem. If you don't believe in coincidence, you come up with a coincidence, it's a little bit of a problem. Because basically it means it's not a coincidence, if you don't believe in coincidence. And if it's not a coincidence, then it means it's a shkacha pratis. If it's shkacha pratis, it means it's emes. There's something about it. Now, it could be that it's sheker anyhow. Kadosh Baruch Hu wants to fool a person. If a person looking to walk the wrong way, as it says, one path, right, to both tzaddikim and Rishoyim will walk the same path. Tzaddikim, they will find the Kadosh Baruch Hu do the right thing. Rishoyim, they'll stumble. Because if you want to live a lie, you'll constantly transform the truth into sheker, and you'll ignore the simanim and the messages from Shemayim. So the events of history, they are there talking to us. They occur because we don't have prophecy today. We don't have Nevi'im today. We barely have Ruach HaKodesh at this point in time. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu still likes to communicate and direct his people. So you can listen, for example, to the mouths of the enemies, because they're the ones telling us what the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants to hear. If we're not zoichet to hear with the mouths of our own people and our own leaders, we're busy out doing shtuyot and things like that, or busy taking care of their other responsibilities, so then we're forced to have to get the messages to the enemies, the mouths of our enemies instead. But, for example, right, in 2001, you had the airplanes flying into the side of the Twin Towers and destroying both buildings. A miraculous event, a negative miracle. There's a positive miracle and there's a negative miracle. That was a negative miracle. A negative miracle means it's lamal neteva, because how they got those planes and how they trained to fly them and actually hit the buildings. It's not so simple to fly commercial jets into the side of two sky. They're not so wide. To take them from Boston and fly them all the way to New York and actually hit those towers without being shot down on top of all that. That's why there's all kinds of conspiracy stories. Why are there conspiracy stories surrounding September 11th? Because there's so many questions left unanswered. How is it possible for this to actually happen? Whatever, it happened. It's fact, it's reality. The pictures are there. The buildings are gone. Right? And the other aspect, one of the other aspects that's unique about it, is the fact that that it only took 103 minutes from the time the first plane flew into the North Tower, the first tower, to the burning down of the second tower. Again, also an impossibility. Because architecturally speaking, engineering speaking, there's no way in the world those buildings should have come down, and certainly not within an hour. There's been no other steel structured buildings in the history of architecture that have come down because of fire like that. And they have all kinds of examples of buildings that burned for 24 hours straight and still didn't collapse internally. And that building had a special core, special central structure specifically against things like planes flying into the side of the building. Again, these are other issues. That's not the point of it. That's not what concerns it. The point is, it was 103 minutes from the beginning until the end. The fact that we even know that is also significant. And there were 19 terrorists supposedly that pulled it off, some of which are still at large, apparently. They haven't got everybody at this point in time, and they made mistakes about other ones. But there was apparently 19 terrorists altogether. There was supposed to have been 20 terrorists. Supposed to have been 20. One didn't make it. They caught that guy. They put him on trial again. He was supposed to be part of the gang of 20. One didn't make it, and only 9 ended up carrying out the attacks. 19 and 103. There's other numbers too, I'm sure, but these are two prominent numbers because that's the time it took for the buildings to burn. And 19 people who were involved. And the reason why it's so significant, because Me'ez Hashem Haisa Zos, Hini was Be'inenu. This is directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that which is wondrous in our eyes. And if there was only supposed to be 19 terrorists from the beginning, it would still be significant. But the fact that there was supposed to be 20 and one didn't make it and ends up being 9 as opposed to or 19 as opposed to 20, and the reason why it's so significant is because you take the words Egel Zahav, right? The gematria of Egel is 103, and the gematria of Zahav is 19. Okay, so that's just a coincidence. Now, happens to be, as another coincidence, right? We don't believe in coincidence, but if you use the word coincidence, but mikro, whatever, happens to be that in the Torah itself, when you're looking, you're searching, and I rarely use Torah codes as part of a presentation to make a point. But this is significant. This is actually phenomenal. There's only 2 places where the Twin Towers show up in the Torah codes. Only 2 places, to my knowledge so far. Here and in Parshas Chukas. And here, not only does it show up in the Parsha, it shows up specifically in the section dealing with the Egel Zahav, and they actually find the Hebrew term ground zero? Ground zero. And all kinds of other things, all kinds of other terminology. Because what do? How do they look for these things? They take a newspaper heading, for example. They take the New York Times, or whatever the case may be, or an Israeli paper might be even easier, and they circle all the main words that keep showing up. Because that's like main themes. And they scan for those. Now, they don't just arbitrarily pick words of their own and say, let's try this one. That works, But no one's using that word over here. It's not associated with the attack of the Twin Towers. No, they take specific words that the media and the world is using and focusing on to describe the event. And then they scan for those. And they look for the closest intersection of all the most common words. And those most common intersections where basically the odds are, that's the other aspect of it, the odds are of such an intersection, for example, of 2 words in the entire Torah, works it to be like 10 to the negative 18 or something like that. In other words, an impossibility. It's basically a mathematical impossibility. So whatever you want to call it, you can call it. But the bottom line is mathematically, scientifically, 10 to the negative 18. It's a little hard to understand all the math behind it, but that's what ends up becoming in the end, right? So that okay. So what? What's the connections? The other place where this is the Parashat with the Egel Zahav, and that's where you have an allusion to the event that's gematrias of the Egel Zahav. The other place that you have the actual allusion is smack in the middle of the Parsha of Paraduma. And if you read Rashi over there, he says specifically the Paraduma comes to Mechaper for the Egel Zahav. It's the Tikkun for the Egel Zahav. That's a very strong connection, right? So the only two places you actually have it in the Torah itself, encoded as far as we found up until now, based upon the words that were commonly used to describe the event, is in the actual story itself of the Erev Rav and the Egel Zahav, and later on in the Parsha dealing with the Tikkun of the Egel Zahav as well. The other question, what's the connection over here? How does it come into play? Now, obviously, in a very important part of this picture, which we discussed the history of them before, but they actually, this is the place where they play out their role the most. This is the place that you see them functioning the strongest, and that's the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav are the instigators. That's their job. As the Or Chaim points out, Or Chaim Kodesh points out, in Parashat Beshalach, the Erev Rav was sent along because Paro thought they were going to come back after 3 days, and to make sure they did come back after 3 days, he sent the Erev Rav out as spies amongst the Jewish people to instigate them and to antagonize them and to break the connection between Moshe Rabbeinu and the people so that they'd want to come back to Mitzrayim after. That was their job, according to Or Chaim. That's Ha'am, all the time mentioned. So in this week's parsha, they come out in full glory, right? They come in full glory and they antagonize the situation. The Jewish people were perfectly willing to, someone doesn't show up for a lunch date. What do? You start panicking the first minute they don't show up, right? You wait a little longer. This is Har Sinai. Kodesh Baruch is right here. Is Arnakom panicking? Is Chor panicking? Is Miriam panicking? No one's panicking over here. Just the Erev Rav. We don't know what happened to this man Moshe who's going to lead us. They're the rabble rousers. They're the one creating all the negativity and the doubt and the fear and the concern and the panic. That's their whole thing. For what? For what? To what end? How do they solve the problem? This is a great thing, right? This is very American. This is very Western, right? It's actually very French. There's historical precedent for this is in this week's Parsha, but where this shows up again later on is by the French Revolution, right? Eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow you are going to die in the end, right? Here comes the guillotine, right? Here it comes. Tomorrow they're going to take us out. So what's the response to that? Throw a party, right? No tshuva involved, no connecting up to higher spiritual planes like other people might. No, let's have a party. Let's forget the whole thing and enjoy ourselves, down to the very last second. So what does the Erev Rav do? We don't know what happened to this man Moshe. We're stuck in the midbar over here. We're leaderless, right? Maybe even godless. We don't know what to do. It's like a scary situation. How do we respond to this? I know. Let's be licentious. Let's have a big party. Let's let go and be Peru and the whole thing. That's the response. That's the goal. That was the goal. The goal was basically to throw off Ol Malchus Shemayim. The goal was to disconnect the Jewish people from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they used the panic situation as a result to instigate it in the end. So the Gra points out the gematria of Erev Rav is Das. It's Das. You add it up, right? Erev Rav is Das. And it's not the guy who goes around Friday afternoons checking the Erev, right? There's a different Erev Rav, right? It's a different job. But the Erev Rav, right, they have the gematria of dust, but that's negative dust, because we have a klal. The klal is the following thing, very important klal in life, and that is that whatever enemy the Jewish people are facing, by definition, is going to be a physical manifestation of a lacking of klal Yisrael on the inside. And we've gone through this before, right? We've spoken about this before. Whatever the Jewish people, if you analyze any particular exile, Bavel, Medai, Yavin, right? Hanukkah comes in response to Yavin. That's the holiday. Why? Hanukkah was meant to happen. Hanukkah was not simply a product, of the victory over the Greeks. Hanukkah was an undercurrent of history. It was flowing below the ground, and it sprouted up like a geyser. It burst through the earth by Hanukkah time because it had to happen. But the Jewish people had to bring it about. But they weren't bringing it about. Something was lacking, just like the Purim miracle as well by Mordecai and Esther. Purim had to happen. Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippurim tells you off the bat, it's not incidental that Purim became a holiday. Purim became a holiday because it had to be a holiday. So why is Haman involved in the picture? Who needs Haman then? Just have a holiday. Tell the Rabbanim through Ruach HaKodesh, there has to be a Purim. Make Purim. There has to be a Chanukah. Make Chanukah. There has to be a Gula Shleima. Just bring the Gula Shleima. Why? Because the Jewish people have to bring it. And what Haman became the, if you could just imagine this actually happening on a physiological. That's the word I was looking for. Physiological level. Imagine like the chesron of a person somehow, using Hollywood science fiction type thing, it becomes like a little ghost thing, and sort of like emerges out of his chest and becomes an enemy standing opposite him in the end. And that's what's going historically. The Jewish people have a chesron. The chesaron they have time to work on, to overcome it. A, to recognize it. B, to figure out how to resolve it. And C, to actually implement a program. Because the Kodesh Baruch Hu will wait. If you have a program that you're working on, if it takes you years to accomplish your goal, but at least you have a program, you have a tachnit, you have a modus operandi that you can use to change the world. First your own world, then the world around you, then the world at large. If you have that program, the Kodesh Baruch Hu says He's working on Himself. He's working on the world. They're doing something. They're moving in the right direction. And I'll give them say to the Shmaya, maybe to speed up, but you need a program. Otherwise, it becomes pogrom. Why? Because the program is what you do to deal with the needs of the moment, to deal with the reality, the lack in history that the Jewish people were created to mimitak in the first place. We get lazy, we get tired, we get sloppy. Muna says that I acknowledge that whatever I'm having faith in is reliable because he's proven himself, or it's proven itself, over time. Bitachon says, okay, so that's in the past. I can't deny the past, right? I can't deny the fact Kodesh Baruch Hu did the Makos in Mitzrayim. I can't deny the fact that Kodesh Baruch Hu did Kriyas Yamsu. That was a real tricky one. That was a tough one. What's going to happen? How will we survive this? Cross the sea, no boats, nothing. Well, the Egyptians are right over here. The chosen of the toughest of the toughest Egyptians right over here. This is an impossible situation. But we got out of it. Kriyas Yamsu, fantastic, spectacular miracle. Kodesh Baruch Hu saved us. Who's going to deny that? Anybody who survived and came across the sea cannot. That's the Tevadik thing. Just a good thing the wind was blowing that way. It happened to stop blowing that way when the Egyptians were coming across it. No, you can't deny it. Even a Shikha Bayamsu. That's what it means. Even a Shikha Bayamsu saw what the Navi Rishonim didn't see. The seven heavens are rent open. What does it mean? There's this big, huge ripping sound. Oh, look at that. Someone gets some needle and threads. Shemaim is like all ripped open over there. It means that the Gilu Yeshchid was so intense on such a high level that nobody had Bechir at that moment in time. Everybody saw the reality of a Kodesh Baruch Hu being involved in history for Kriyas Yamsuf. Phenomenal levels. You can't deny it. So what happens then? So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, okay, I didn't ask much from you up until this point in time. In Mitzrayim, all I asked you to do was be ready to go. That's all. Just be willing and ready to go. If you were willing and ready to go, you survived until the 10th Makkah, and even you went up from Mitzrayim. By Kriyas Yamsuf, I stood there and I listened to all your scoffing, and all your complaining, all your crying, and all your lack of bitachon amunah. In spite of all the fantastic miracles I did back in Mitzrayim, I listened to it. I split the sea anyhow, right? And I've done it in the entire time. We get to Eretz Yisrael, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu says, okay, now you're going to be involved. You go conquer the land. 31 kings, you go conquer the land, and let's see what happens over here. So now what's the cheshbon over here? So a person says, up until now, I can't deny Kodesh Baruch Hu has been with us, but now that we'll be directly involved in having to fight for ourselves, and how reliable is he? Well, we can't deny the fact that in the past he was always very reliable. What about the future? Well, maybe it's going to stop. Maybe all the miracles that allowed me to get to where I am today, after all these years of living here in Israel, whether a kavua parnasa, and having to rely upon this and rely upon that, but here I'm still here after all this time, month after month, year after year, miracle after miracle. But maybe this is the month that ends. Maybe this is the last month, right? I'm worried because I'm not denying that the miracles up until now. So Kosh Baruch Hu says that's specifically the Nesoyim, projecting into the future what you did in the past. Bitachon means that you take the lessons of the past, and what does it say? Atah haresa ladat. Right? I showed you to know. Right in those words there is the entire mandate of the Jewish people. The entire lesson we're speaking about. Atah haresa ladat. What does it mean? Atah haresa, you saw. What does it mean you saw? It's all past tense. You saw already. You witnessed the miracles. I gave you all these miracles and all these Yeshuas for free, that you should know I do these things for you and save you. But not stam. Not like, for example, where a son, keeps making bad financial decisions. He keeps going in debt. His father's very wealthy. He keeps bailing him out. He gets a phone call, I'm, $5,000 in debt. The father writes a check and, and then goes back home again. And the son calls up another, a few months, I'm $10,000 in debt. The father writes a check and he says, okay, fine. No, he keeps bailing his son out again. But once the father writes the check, he's finished. If it wasn't for the fact that my son was in trouble, I wouldn't write the check necessarily. But once he's already in trouble, I have to bail him out, so I write him a check and I go back home again. Which Baruch Hu is saying that's not what's going on over here. It wasn't like, my kids are in trouble once again. Okay, well, let's go write a check and take them into Mitzrayim. Oh, you're in trouble again by the Red Yam Suf? Okay, whatever. We'll open the Yam Suf and spare the Jewish people. But I'm going back home right after this again. That's not what's going on here. The Torah is telling you, Atah hareis ladas. The reason I put you in all these scenarios, I put you in all these situations of need, was so I could do the miracle for you, the fantastic names for you, so you would be able to ladas. What does ladas mean over here? What's ladas? Atah hareis ladas. I gave you all this vision. I shared with you all these miracles that you should now know it. Know what? What's the point of knowing it now? Right? What's the just a sense of gratitude over here? No, because now, from this point onward, I'm not going to be functioning the same level. This entire experience from Mitzrayim was specifically to give you a knowledge base of understanding how I'm involved in history and doing miracles. But I can't work this way all the time. Because if I work this nikla all the time, there'll be no room for bechira. And the point of creation is bechira. I'll still be doing the same miracles, but I'm going behind the scenes. And if you ask the question, how do I know? Because Baruch Hu is there running the world and protecting me and saving me and doing all those things, right? How do I know all that? Atah hareis ladas. Because once he did. Once he came out in the open and saved our skin time after time after time, so we would now project that into the future. So going into Eretz Yisrael was the first opportunity that we really had to see if we actually chap the message. And Mitzrayim is all part of the same idea. Atah hareis ladas. You have to be able to know. So that's exactly what the Gemara is telling you. Until the time of Purim, they could not be makabel Torah shebal peh. What's the whole point of Torah shebal peh? Torah shebal peh, basically, as opposed to Torah shebal Torah shebal peh really measures the depth of the relationship and the bitachon amun you have in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because that's where all the pratim are to tell you how to do the mitzvahs. And you will do the mitzvahs in the level based upon your connection to Hashem. I will do tefillin to the degree it has to be done based upon how close I feel to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how much I understand it. So what happened by Purim time, specifically, and tied to the Keteris, which is also the whole concept of das, Keteris and das are the same idea in the end. But what happens specifically, and that's why Morcha is mentioned specifically by the das itself, why Haman comes against it, the Erev of the whole thing, is because the Jewish people achieved das by Purim time. They achieved the knowledge and understanding. That was that they could finally say, it's true. Up until now, it's been an emunah. Because Baruch Hu showed us all this. He saved us. We went through all that we went through. The entire time we witnessed the miracles one after the other, the makos and Kriyas Yam Suf, and as Rabbi Kiva says, and this, and when Gamma says, 500, 200, and all fantastic involvement in history, and then he went underground. And we've been wondering up until now, where is he? So Purim was Megala, he's always been there. That's when they witness, if you have experience, you have an insight, something happens, you can say, that's what that means. I mean, I've always heard this idea before. I've always been told this before. I've always read this before, but I never emotionally connected to. Now I see. This geula, now I see. This redemption, this hashkacha pratis, now I see Kosh Baruch Hu, when it means a tahares ladas. That's the fulfillment of a tahares ladas. The experience back in Mitzrayim, to know. And once they were able to see that and feel it, witness it, so memela, they're makabel torsh bal peh. You see this by Bala Tshuva all the time. It's a remarkable thing. You take a person who's chozi b'tshuva. It's like, it's the most bizarre thing. Why do it? Why? Why become from? Okay, if you're being forced to do it for whatever reason, you'd be compelled. Someone's, could cut you their insurance, their Yerusha, if you don't become from, whatever. But what? Why does the person comes in, right? And it's like, he says to you, he says, Rabbi, I like the hashkafa, even the food's not so bad, right? But don't talk about this mitzvah business. I'm not doing mitzvahs. I'm not doing commandments. In fact, this is exactly what happened to me way back at the beginning. When I was first becoming from, way back, I think it was like 1925 or something like that. And it was like, I was going to classes, and I thought to myself, this is great. This will make me a better husband, a better father. It didn't mean, but anyhow, ask my kids, and it make me a better this, a better that, right? And I said specifically to people teaching me, I said, I'm going to come to the classes, I enjoy the material, but don't talk to me about commandments. I'm not interested. I'm not doing that stuff. It's making me so very weird and strange. So of course they just went, no problem. No problem. Just keep coming to classes. Just come to classes. In fact, this is one of the most important things you learn about kiruv. Kiruv is not about so much educating a person as much as it's making the environment user-friendly. The person wants to come back a second time and a third time. That's why Shabbos is. Why are Shabbos to this very day one of the most successful devices when it comes to Makara people? Of all the shiurim and all the seminars are good for getting people to the Shabbos table. But Shabbos ultimately is one of the best, what does it? The nice meal, the good food, the family singing together, the very Torah. That's what does it. Because gradually, slowly, what happens is almost through a certain osmosis, they absorb the das of Shabbos. They absorb the das of the hashkafa of the people. And it gets inside. Das is not something you can simply give to a person. You can't inherit it. That's one of the reasons why the Torah leaders are not based upon, it's not a Yerusha. By the Malchus, you can have a Yerusha of the kingdom, right? Who's king. But Rosh Hashivas, it depends upon who's Zeicher, because Malchus is a different story than Das itself. Das is the concept of Chachma flowing into the person. Now, the reason why that's so important is because the whole relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu is totally dependent upon one's Das. Because it's das as opposed to blind faith. People, the rest of the world is a concept of blind faith. Blind faith basically means that you don't ask questions, simply believe. And the trouble with blind faith, of course, is that you can totally miss the point, miss the boat. In order to have bitachon nemuna, in order to have the real bitachon, not blind faith, faith, real faith, faith based upon atah haresh ladas. You saw, you witnessed, you know, you understand. You can see how it's historically true. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Atah Haresh Ladas, because Baruch Hu constantly saving Klal Yisrael from the clutches of death and all the disasters taking place historically. You wouldn't be here today. We see, we understand that. Do I know that? Is it in my heart? When I put on my tefillin and I'm davening and I'm doing the mitzvahs, is it my das? Is it my understanding? Am I a kli? Because that's all what it's all about. Becoming a kli. I want that kodesh. And if you don't take it, as a Gra points out, he says the war at the end of days primarily is against the Erev Rav. Yishmael and Edom, they're sideshows. They looked at the real thing, but he says the Erev Rav, they're the worst part of the final battle at the end of days. And he says everybody's mechuyev to fight against them, he says. And he goes one step further, he says, and anyone who does not fight against them, Mamela has joined them. You became part of them in the end. And he says that that's the case. This is the Gra speaking. He says, better you weren't born at all. That's it, yeah. Loosen the tie over there. It's a kind of a tough statement over there. What does it mean by? What do you mean by that? That's exactly the point. He says there's only positive das and negative das. Eitz das tov v'ra. the shorsh of Haman. Hamina 8, right? There's either positive dust or negative dust. It's like a hospital room, right? There's either sterile environment or insterile. That's the word, insterile environment, right? To the extent you don't keep the room clean, that's how much bacteria is going to come. There's no neutral ground over here. There's no like, well, we didn't clean this week, but the bacteria hasn't come yet. There's like a neutral area where for 1 week the room's holding it in limbo. It's like not yet sterile. It's not yet, no. You don't clean the room. You're not washing the walls and washing this. The bacteria moves right in. It's like a vacuum. Amalek moves right in. It's a vacuum. The Erev Rav fills that gap right away. That's what they said. We don't know where this Moshe is. It's a little vacuum. What's Moshe? Moshe comes from the Das. Moshe is Das. That's Torah. That's Moshe. Right? The Torah is Moshe. He's the Das, right? We don't know where this Das is right now. And right in. The Jewish people, we're neutral. We'll wait till it comes back. We don't know what to do, but we'll wait till it comes back. No problem. Not the Erev Rav. It's missing for 1 second. There's a void there until he's late by 1 second. Until he's late, they can't say a thing. His dust is still there because it's going to come back. He's late by 1 second, boom, right in. The dust goes right in, just like that. Because Baruch Hu says, that's the whole point. That's the mistake. That's why Klal Yisrael is held responsible for the Egel Zahav, because that's what you allowed it to come in. If you're not going to develop your dust, if you're not going to become a kli for Ruach HaKodesh, for the Chachma, a Tachon and a Dam Das, if you're not going to be a makabel for the dust of Kodesh Baruch Hu, you're letting the dust of the Erev Rav infect you too. For whatever dust is missing from you, Erev Rav, the negative dust, faulty perceptions, faulty conceptions, faulty ideas, until eventually you look completely like Esav, just like him. And that's why the Twin Towers, right? The Twin Towers, that's what the Egel Zahav represents. The Twin Towers is a symbol of Esav's culture. There's power, his way of looking at the world, materialistic, proud, right? But also flimsy. They came down like cash. That's the most amazing thing. Rashi brings down, right, in Parashat, from the Pasuk from Avadja, he brings it in Parashat Yesh at the beginning, but Esav is like cash. Esav is like cash and a flame. Yaakov's a fire and Yosef is a flame. The flame will go from Yosef and burn up all the, it's like a most bizarre thing. Like the buildings burned like they were cash, like they were straw. It burned in 1 hour. It's like there's concrete. See the pictures? It's like incredible. Nothing left. Like you're looking like, where is everything? The furniture and this and the girders and where and they shipped it all out after that. It was like the whole place was cleaned up in a matter of a couple of weeks. Phenomenal. If I didn't know better, the place was made from wood. Just wood that burned down to the ground. There was a point being made. That's Esav's world. And that changed. That's why it was the turning point. It was a turning point historically. So because Baruch Hu was telling the Jewish people, okay, right? It's enough. It's time to stop being like Esav and start being like Yisrael. It's time to start leaving the dust of the culture you've been amongst up until now and think like a Jew. You were shown to know. And the measure of that knowledge is going to be your bitachon emunah. And the measure of your bitachon emunah is going to be your willingness to rely upon me. And live places where you have to rely upon me. And not stay places where you don't have to rely upon me in the end. That's what the whole Parashat is about. That's what the rest of the Torah is all about. That was the whole build up until now. That's why it's called, Bereshit is called Sefer Yesharim, because the Yashrus of Avi Yitzchak and Yaakov, the main trait, as the Gemara points out in Sanhedrin, of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, was they took the knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the past and projected it into the future and didn't fetch. When history did not go the direction they planned it to go. Because they knew that even though it looked like the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was withdrawn, it was always there, guiding history. And that's what Purim is all about. And that's why Mordechai has this week's Parashat by the Ketaris and the Egel Zahav. The Egel Zahav is the result of everybody's life when you let the dust of the Erev Rav infiltrate and change your way of thinking to the point that you become foggy about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's involvement in your life, how he runs the world, and what you have to do to become closer to him.